You left off 3711. No, that's all right. We go into closed session for A1 personnel, A5 industrial business prospects, A7 legal. And is there anything else that we need to add?
Second. Motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor? I'll call the Board of Supervisors meeting back to order. I'd like to have Miss Lisa Richardson to lead the invocation and Manuel Street the pledge, please.
I'd like to ask if you will join me in saying the Lord's Prayer. Raise your hand, please. Our Father who art in heaven,
Hallowed be thy name.
thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, and forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion of what we discussed in closed session.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that based on the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3711, we discussed A1 personnel matters, A5 industrial business prospects, and A7 legal.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor? And one abstention. Missed that.
You want to get those or later?
We could probably just do it when we do the program on new business. I need a motion for the adoption of the agenda and the additional agenda as presented.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? I need a motion for the minutes of the previous meeting from November 14th.
So move.
Second.
Motion and second. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? You ready for the financial status?
I will try to tell you what I know. How's that?
All right.
As you're well aware, it's tax season here in Smyth County, so some of the reports that you may typically see, we do not have today due to the Treasurer's Office trying to post some amounts and go through the mail and all of that. So what I can describe to you today is you should have a couple of revenue expenditure reports. Those are actually generated here. And I'll start with the revenue. If you look at the revenue, page 1, and I always go down to year-to-date. If you look at the year-to-date under Fund 1, you'll see there's $18,953,207.53. That is the revenues that have been brought in under Fund 1 to date. The next 3 to 4 pages are again the various funds that the county has. If you look on what's called page 6 at the top, down at the bottom, year-to-date column, fourth one over, you'll see a total of $41,319,553.23. We're pretty close to where we ought to be in collections. We're around the 50% mark 6 months through the year. If you look at the expenditure side again, Fund 1, bottom of the first page, $9,777,330.09. You make just Fund 1 to Fund 1 comparisons, we're about $9 million ahead in the revenue. Again, if you look at pages 2, 3, 4, and 5 is the final page, year-to-date, fourth one over. And expenditures, $32,348,176.08, and it held pretty true, about just right at $9 million ahead. So pretty much in line as what we've been accustomed to for those two reports. The only other report that I was able to get to you today is an AP comparison from 17-18 to 18-19. As you can see, if you go down each one of those departments, you can see how we compare in a year's time. Go to the bottom, total AP is about $53,641.18 less over the year. So I do not have an expense report from the treasurer. I do not have a treasurer's accountability. What I do have, we were able to get a balance shortly before closed session today. The available funds today is $14,953,891.26. Those are sufficient to cover your appropriations listing on your additional agenda. So, fortunately, I don't have anything else to share with you today other than that number and those appropriations. If there's any questions, I'll do my best to ask. The treasurer will be here today. I think there was a request from the prior board meeting to have him here to talk about delinquent taxes. He will be here around the 5:30 hour. If there are any questions about any of the numbers or any of that, he'll certainly be before you.
On our appropriations for general county, accounts payable listing, $810,037.33. Payroll, $705,435.09. Auto draft rule development, $8,974. AEP CenturyLink bills, $25,000. County administration fund, $5,000, for a total county appropriation plus carryover of $1,535,000.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor? MEC trough funds, $323,200.
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Social services, December the 12th to December the 31st of 18, $350,000. January 1st to January 8th, $60,000, for total social services of $410,000.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? School operating fund, instruction, $3 million. Administration, attendance and health, $130,000. Transportation, $290,000. Facilities, $325,000. School food service, $330,000. Technology, $195,000, for a total school operating fund of $4,270,000.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? School debt capital outlay, $2,500.
So moved. Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? EDA Fund 4, $97.60.
So moved. Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Sheriff Fund 748, $5,304.61.
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Recovery Court Fund, $749, $609.50. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Adwell Sewer Project, $35,220.92.
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? It's 5:15, now open citizens time.
No one signed up, Mr. Chairman.
No one signed up to speak. Does anybody wish to speak at citizens time? Shall leave it open for a minute in case somebody comes, or just?
Possibly, while it's open, maybe hit the committee meetings that were on your additional agenda.
Okay, well, we'll leave citizen time open for about 5 minutes or 10 if anybody comes and wants to speak. Committee recommendations, Animal Control Committee, Mr. Atkins, on page 20.
Okay, the committee met to consider we met on December 6th, and the committee met to consider 2 animal control dog damage claims. The claims were, the claim amount is based on fair market value according to Virginia Code Section 3.2-6553, which identifies a not-to-exceed amount of $750 per animal and $10 per fowl. Lid Barris, the first claim is from Lid Barris for 1 Holstein steer. Smyth County Extension Office, Andy Overbay advised a price of $425. Ms. Barris had stated value of $400, and after reviewing the information on the claim and it being deemed that it was dog kill, Todd Dishner made a motion to approve the claim for $400, and it was approved unanimously by the committee.
That's a committee recommendation. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor?
And then we had the second claim we had was from Tim Spencer for 1 sheep. Smyth County Extension Office advised the price of $158.75. After review, Todd Dishner made a motion to deny the claim as recommended by the Smyth County Animal Control due to time of notification undetermined predator. All amounts agreed. In other words, basically he didn't turn it in right away, and with just several issues that came up, so therefore we disallowed the claim. I don't know, do we need to vote on that? Because we disallowed, there's nothing to vote on, so. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then Mr. Simpson, Assistant County Administrator, presented information concerning acceptance of funds from the sale of animal-friendly plates by the DMV. And Smyth County is due $450 from the fund, and we voted to let the Smyth County Humane Society receive those funds as we have done in the past. After discussion, Park District Supervisor Todd Dishner made a motion to approve the assignment of the funds to Smyth County Humane Society, and the vote was unanimous.
There's a committee recommendation as well. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Thank you.
That was it.
Appointment Committee, Mr. Blevins.
We had several appointments, so please bear with me. First, we had District 3 Co-op Board. We had a recommendation to reappoint Mr. Charlie Atkins from the Atkins District with Todd Dishner as the alternate to serve on this board beginning January 1, and that was a 3-year term. That was unanimous committee recommendation.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
To the Mount Rogers Community Service Board, had a recommendation for a 3-year term to appoint Ms. Joanne Grosclose to that board. And again, that was unanimous committee recommendation to begin January 1 of 2019.
It's a 3-year term as well.
3-year term, yes.
That was a committee recommendation as well. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
For the New River Mount Rogers Workforce Development Board, we had a motion to appoint Jeffrey Dunnick, who's a production manager for Sholey and Chilhowie, to serve on this board. It is a 3-year term, and it would begin January 1 of 2019. That was a unanimous committee recommendation.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
We had the New River and Mount Rogers Workforce Investment Consortium Board, and we had a recommendation to reappoint Ms. Judy Wyant with Mr. Atkins, Ms. Judy Wyant to the board, with Mr. Atkins serving as the alternate. Again, this will be a one-year term and would begin January 1 of 2019. And that was a unanimous committee recommendation.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Opposed?
Do I just accept?
You can vote or whatever. Okay.
For the Smyth Airport Commission, we had a recommendation to reappoint Curtis Pennington to the Smyth Airport Commission for a 4-year term, again, beginning January 1 of 2019, and this was a unanimous committee recommendation.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
CPMT parent representative, we had a recommendation to appoint Mr. Blake Frazier to this committee. This would be let me start over again. We had a recommendation for the CPMT, and don't ask me what that stands for, but it involves, there you go. That was a mouthful. Mr. Blake Frazier to fulfill the term, the remainder of Ms. Teresa Wilkerson, and that term will expire June 30th of 2019. And that was a unanimous committee recommendation.
Any more discussion?
I just have one question. Has he been contacted and assured us he's going to try to make the meetings? Because it's important we have somebody on this committee.
Says he would.
Okay.
All those in favor? Opposed?
And before I go on, I would like to say, I mean, this year I'm the chairman of the appointment committee. We work very hard to try to find people to assign to the committees that will do a good job. From the Board of Supervisor standpoint, I would like to remind all board members that is an expectation that we do attend their meetings. I've been getting information from 2 or 3 different boards that we have people not showing up for their meetings. I would strongly encourage you to do that. It's not fair to the rest of the board members to attend 20 and 30 meetings and then have someone not show up to meetings. So please attend your meetings, and if there is an issue, please notify the individuals instead of just not showing. Thank you.
Building and Grounds Committee. Scott, will you take that one?
I can. The first item we had at the Building and Grounds Committee, it was at 3:45 on Thursday, the 6th of December. We received sealed bids for the Cornerstone building. We received 1 bid for the building, which was, the bid was from the Mount Rogers Community Service Board. Their sealed bid amount was $128,600 minus the cost of some of the recent improvements they've made to the building of $37,185, which made the remaining cash bid $91,415. After discussion, Supervisor Blevins made a motion to reject the bid received, and Supervisor Call seconded the motion. It was a unanimous recommendation to accept the bid.
Do we need a motion for that?
Formally, there'll probably be some questions that come about if it's not a formal action of the board to reject the bid. So,
Okay, well, that was the committee's recommendation to reject the bid. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Next item
at the committee, as Mr. Carter informed the committee, the appraisal for the Morrison building had been completed, and he was waiting on the full report. That was completed by the state, and they'll forward their appraisal report as soon as it's completed. Next item was I updated the committee concerning the contract for HVAC maintenance for all of the county buildings. Contract is currently for 5 years, renews annually, and the last renewal is eligible to be renewed for the April of 19 to March of 20 time period. However, after discussion, Supervisor Blevins made a motion to rebid the HVAC contract. Supervisor Call seconded the motion. Unanimous recommendation to go back out for RFP for the HVAC contract.
Does that cover, how many systems does that?
It covers 4 buildings. It covers this building, the courthouse, the health department, and the sheriff's office.
As a whole, which are multi-units at all of them, or is it just like central boiler type?
It's different at each building. This building here is a lot of individual air units and all the offices, one central evaporator outside. The health department has 2 pretty large units that supply everything to that building. The sheriff's office has 2 large units that are air handlers, and then some individual air conditioners in certain IT spaces. And the courthouse has about 7 or 8 different air handlers and units that are on the roof, and then most of the individual office areas have their own. It's a variable refrigerant system, so there's large refrigerant units that feed refrigerant to individual offices that then utilize that refrigerant for temperature control in each individual space. So there's a lot of units at the courthouse. So each building's a little bit different.
Could you tell the company that's doing that currently, or?
The company that's doing it currently is Cook's Mechanical. They've been doing it for the last 4 years under this contract, and I believe 3 years under the prior contract.
Pretty big organization, industrial type.
It's, yes, there's specific resources that these companies need to be able to maintain some of the older equipment we have in 2 of the buildings.
Thank you. That was a committee recommendation as well. Any more discussion on that one? All those in favor? Thank you. Nobody's showed up, so I'll close citizens' comments.
I think we could address the item at 5:30. I believe Frank is in.
Yep.
Look around.
Okay.
Weird, but
We've got Mayville Engineering Company recognition. Mr. Frank Costanen will be in the attendance to receive recognition and provide an update to the board.
we have an opportunity here.
Yeah.
We have a really big check, and that is figuratively and realistically that Mr. Dishner, as chairman, you could, it takes 2 hands to hold.
Okay.
That gives you any indication.
Yes, sir.
But,
That's a big check. I just want to take that home with me. What would you like me to do? You're good right there where you are. I'm just going to present it to you for April Engineering Company of $323,200. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Go in the bank window. You may have that window.
and Frank, I know we're kind of putting you on the spot, but
It's okay.
First of all, I just want to, thank Smith County for their help in expanding MEC's manufacturing footprint. We're excited about doing that. MEC continues to expand and grow its business both organically and through acquisitions, which is important as we continue to grow. We currently have 16 locations with over 2 million square foot of manufacturing space, employing over 2,100 people. We're happy to be, a good portion of those folks working here in Southwest Virginia. Very diverse industry portfolio, serving markets in power sports, commercial vehicle, construction and forestry, agriculture, military, power generation. So another, pretty diverse. So opens us up for more work and bringing more work to Southwest Virginia. Our sales for 2018 will exceed $340 million, with growth potential to $400 million by 2020. Nice thing about that diversity is none of the above markets that we serve have more than 30% within our revenue. So very diverse, so allows us to actually scale and be agile as the economy changes. And we'll continue to remain diverse so we can quickly react to the economic needs. So again, just want to say thank you for everything you've done, and we look forward to continuing to grow here in Southwest Virginia.
Absolutely. I'll do this. Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Carter, is that all you had for that one?
It is. I don't see Mr. Burkett.
He's not.
Or our auditors in the audience.
We'll go down to the Speyside Bourbon Agreements. Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, on pages 24 through 54 of your packet are the most updated and approved versions of the performance agreements with respect to the Speyside project. They are ready for your approval tonight and then for execution by the chairman. That's your discretion.
It's a pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the Speyside Performance Agreement as presented on pages 24 to 54 and to authorize the appropriate signatures on the performance agreement.
Second.
Motion and second. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to approve a COF performance agreement with an unnamed business as presented in closed session and give permission to the appropriate individuals to sign.
So moved.
Motion and seconds on the floor. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Consideration of resolution for broadband services. Well, that's a topic on a lot of people's.
It's fairly large. I'll be glad to take that, Mr. Chairman. On page 55 through 62, there's a couple of things. One is a resolution, which is on page 55. The supporting documents on page 56 through 62 is an explanation of what the resolution is for. But to sum it up, as everyone knows, there is a demonstrated need of not only expanded broadband services here in Smyth County and Southwest Virginia as a whole, but also some updates to what services currently are there. And there's terms for that. It's underserved or non-served. But what is happening is the Tobacco Commission has some grant funding that they're putting into expansions within localities that are served through the region of the tobacco region. And there's been some installation of lines across southwest and south side, not to the degree in which, Mr. Campbell, you can correct me, but I believe the governor has determined that within 10 years, every Virginian will have access to broadband. And that's a big statement. Unfortunately, not a lot of people have that much patience with it reaching them individually. So as a step towards providing some additional services here in the county, I've been working with Senator Carrico and the Tobacco Commission on some opportunities. And for this area, it is, and I'll read the resolution aloud, but this area is looking more toward the eastern part of Smyth County as a starting point. We're trying to capitalize on this new funding that's been provided to increase or upgrade the existing services. So I know that Mr. Atkins, you and I have had discussions about this as of late, and I feel like this is a good starting point for the county to begin looking at not only covering the identified area, but expanding these services throughout the county. Unfortunately, we have to start somewhere. So if the board would like, I would be glad to read the resolution aloud for the record.
Please, sir.
It's a resolution approving the filing of a grant application with the Tobacco Regional Revitalization Commission. Whereas the Tobacco Region Revitalization Commission will accept applications for a second round of last mile broadband funding in spring of 2019 for up to $5 million and will be made available for assisting in the construction of last mile broadband telecommunications infrastructure in the unserved areas of the Tobacco region. Guidelines for the grant application were posted in November of 2018, and the deadline for pre-applications has been set for December 21st of 2018. And whereas the program guidelines for grant applications requires a government entity as the applicant with a qualified and experienced private sector broadband provider as the co-applicant. Whereas Comcast Corporation has recently discussed its plans to rebuild parts of its system in the eastern end of Smyth County. This project will bring high-speed internet to a selected portion of Smyth County and could involve areas of reconstruction and/or reconstruction. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Supervisors of the County of Smyth does hereby approve the submittal of a grant pre-application to the Tobacco Region Revitalization Commission to assist in constructing last-mile broadband telecommunications infrastructure in a portion of the unserved areas of the Tobacco region. And further, it be resolved, by adoption of this resolution, the Board of Supervisors of Smyth County authorize the county administrator to take such action necessary to file the grant pre-application with the Tobacco Commission, identifying the co-applicant as Comcast Corporation. And just as a side note, the way that these grants work, as you can tell from the pre-application, is you have to have a partner with a provider. And Comcast is in that area, and they are willing and able to be the co-applicant for this particular project. And with that in mind, we have identified them as the co-applicant. And by consideration of today, this certainly doesn't do anything but authorize us to file the pre-application. There's a lot of work that goes into that. There's a soft deadline as identified later this month, and then there's a more firm deadline later next year. But I would ask that the board consider at least adopting the resolution and helping us to move forward in getting these services to the county.
I got one question, I guess. Like there's a lot of advertisement going around on social media, I suppose, of Sunset.
They bought BBU.
Yeah, that's a broadband as well. I know it seems like with radio systems, everybody's got to be on the same. Is broadband
Provider generated, but what Sunset is doing, if I'm correct, is they're beginning a kind of a community campaign to have people go to their website, identify their interest in having the service, setting up some type of community meeting so that they can be more interactive, and then make a determination based on the interest to consider whether or not what they do moving forward in those communities.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
was Comcast, Michael, the only company that was available to partner with?
That was the identified partner from the state, as well as in the immediate area. Now, there are others. There are problems with every one of them, I guess, but there are other providers. In this instance, it was in the area, it was available, and they agreed to partner.
So it was determined by the state, and
They were working this avenue. They are in discussions with Comcast on other locations across the southwest, south side. So I've relied on their guidance for that portion of it.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to make a motion, we approve this resolution, provided, Mike, I'd like to have you check out that third paragraph, that last reconstruction or make sure that wording is correct. See what I'm talking about?
The two reconstructions.
Yeah, that could involve areas of reconstruction and/or reconstruction. Make sure that wording is correct.
Yeah, there's something wrong with
Yeah.
the reconstruction.
Yeah, I move we approve it with that being looked at.
Absolutely.
Second.
Got a motion and a second on the floor. Any more discussion? One question I have is, of course, I guess it would come, I mean, I don't know what the vote's going to be, but we've got two board members absent. I guess will they won't be recorded as nays, they just won't be recorded. Is that correct? I was kind of leading the charge on something happening, and that if they were here, and if they, of course, I don't answer for anybody else's vote, so. Okay. All those in favor? Thank you. Mr. Burkett, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Come on up and take a stand.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, at Mike's request, I'm here to provide an update on our delinquent tax collection program and to provide a brief synopsis of our activities. Let me begin, and some of this will be repetitive to those of you who've heard me before, but let me begin by stating that on June 30th of every fiscal year, we are required by code to write off any real estate tax that is more than 20 years old and any personal property that's more than 5 years old. On June 30th, 2018, I was pleased we had collected 99% of the combined levies for the 97 real estate and the 2012 personal property taxes. Let me also add that if you factor the penalty and interest that we collect in that, it is more than the amount of tax that's actually written off. So the net result is you actually collect more than the levy, but banks budget the penalty and interest. But we don't, because we only get it once we collect the tax itself. Now, to look at it another way and provide a bit of an illustration of the progression of collections, take the 1998 real estate and the 2013 personal property. The personal property taxes will be written off on June 30th, 2019, while the real estate will remain on the books for another 15 years. As of November 30th, 2018, we are at 98% collection of the 1998 real estate and 2013 personal property taxes. For 2014 combined levies, the 2014 personal and the corresponding real, we're at 97%. The 2015 96%. 2016, 95%, and the 2017 combined levy that were due 12 months ago, we're at 94% collection. And this, again, is without factoring penalty and interest in any of that. As for our collection activities, every November, we submit a list of delinquent taxpayers to the Virginia Department of Taxation as part of the debt set-off program. This program allows localities to attach a claim to an individual state income tax refund, if one is forthcoming, or even to the lottery winnings should someone be so fortunate. The refund on or lottery winnings is then applied to either the real estate personal property tax or both. On November 1st, 2018, which that's the first day you can submit them to the state, and so we always try to get them there on the 1st as early as possible so that we can get in front of some other people. But anyway, on November 1st, we submitted over 6,800 claims, and we will begin receiving matches after the first of the year when people file their state income taxes. Keep in mind that 6,800, if it's a husband and wife, or a grandfather and a grandchild, that's a claim against both of them in the event one gets a state income tax refund. With the assistance of the Smyth County Sheriff's Department, we successfully levied on 2 businesses in 2017. Both of those levies have been satisfied. One was satisfied, while the other involved equipment that was sold at auction earlier this year. We levied in 17, but this involves a factory over in Saltville that ultimately we sold the equipment in the building. Then we had a judicial tax sale in the summer and sold the building itself. And Reline, which happened to be in the same industrial park, wanted the building and got the building, so that worked out well. For several years now, we've been working with the Department of Motor Vehicles in the DMV stop program. This program allows us to electronically place a stop on renewing the registration of a vehicle or vehicles should a personal property tax be owed on one or more of the vehicles. Please keep in mind that this program only applies to vehicles and personal property tax. We currently have several hundred active DMV stops in place, and we'll be adding to the total in March after mailing second notices. You have to give at least a 30-day notice before you place a stop on the vehicle. So what we do every year in the second notice, we put language on that notice saying that if failure to pay your personal property tax may result in a stop being placed. That way we're covered for that entire year as we download those DMV stops. Additionally, in partnership with Taxing Authority Consulting Services, the acronym is TACS, we have been collecting delinquent real estate taxes through the judicial sale process. The judicial sale process involves notifying the delinquent taxpayer of the pending legal action before approaching the circuit court and requesting permission to proceed to sell the property. Once the court grants that permission, there are numerous, and I mean numerous, notification requirements and hearings, as well as a title search to be completed prior to conducting the sale. Once the sale's been completed and the high bid's confirmed by the court, in other words, if someone bids $5,000 on this particular piece of property, the judge is going to confirm it, providing there were, we have 30 to 50 people at the sale. If you've got a good showing of people at the sale, then the judge accepts that as being a fair market value given the number of people there. We've never had one not confirmed. However, that's in place so that if one person showed up to a sale and paid $200 for a 40-acre piece of land or something, it wouldn't be confirmed. But we've never had a problem with that. Anyway, once it's been confirmed by the judge, the new owner receives a clear title as part of the special commissioner's deed. That's one of the best deeds you can get because it's signed off on by a judge. Currently, after our last sale, we now have 159 properties in various stages of the judicial sale process. Our last sale was October 29th, and it was the third sale of 2018. And as a side note, I know I've talked with Mike and Scott about this. Another positive result we've seen by accident through this judicial sale process has been the reaction of mortgage companies. We now have more and more mortgage companies who are requesting files, some on a monthly basis from us, to make sure that they don't have any accounts that are in jeopardy of going to the judicial sale process. Like I say, it was unexpected, but it's appreciated. The reason they are so concerned about it, once we turn a property over to TACS for a judicial sale, it goes up 20% by code. So it's a big incentive to try to, get it paid prior to. And they may, I know Mike and Scott will remember the infamous Sheridan Ridge. This has been a few years back. They had a lawyer, and the judge granted us permission to proceed. And I said, all right, I'll give you a week with your client. Otherwise, I'm turning it over, which they owed a lot of money because they had set their own assessment at like $14 million. And, of course, the assessment was reflective of that, or the taxes. But anyway, I think it was 2 days before the sale, they paid it. It cost them over $100,000 because they waited to pay it. In conclusion, I always try to tell people this. Please remember that 8 months from now, we will add approximately $17 million to the uncollected total. As long as there's a new tax levy that, once you set the rate in July, the commissioner has 90 days to get the book ready. We've been getting them out around getting the book in August. So 8 months from now, we're going to add $17 million to that uncollected total. And that happens every single year. But as I've tried to explain, that does not mean that, as long as there's a new levy every 8 months after the due date, there will always be an uncollected tax balance. But as I've tried to explain, that does not mean they go uncollected. It's just you add so much more every 8 months than what you've got to collect. It's just a continuous cycle. I'm very pleased with our collections program, especially considering the external factors we face as a community that can influence those collections. According to social services, there are more than 11,000 individuals receiving assistance through SNAP or Medicaid, which represents 34% of our 32,000 citizens, and that number is getting ready to go up with Medicaid expansion, so it'll be higher than that. Last time I asked, 56% of all school-age pupils qualify for free or reduced lunch. And so when you consider our unemployment rate currently is 4%, and the number of people social services is providing assistance to, and the percentage of school-age pupils eligible for free or reduced lunch, it speaks pretty well to the citizens that we've been able to maintain that collection rate. In conclusion, I wish we could collect 100% by the December 5th due date, but I'm nevertheless pleased with the collections as it's going.
Thanks, Tom. Does anybody have any questions or want to?
No, I just would like to thank you for coming, Tom. I think I was the one who asked the question when I saw the amount of money that was uncollected.
Yes, please.
And I was just curious the process that was followed in, in pursuing that, the time frame and all that, and I think you've answered all that very well. But since you're here, and since I'm new on the board,
sure.
There's a couple of questions I'd like to just know in general as far as your office and county functions. Are you part of like the budget making process for the county?
No, ma'am. We are for our own. In other words, we come up and meet with the budget committee.
You do meet with the budget committee? Okay.
On our budget.
Oh, just
on the treasurer's budget.
But not for the county?
No, ma'am.
That seems interesting to me that we wouldn't know we wouldn't have to get from you a projection of what we expect to
Well,
receive.
when I first started, which was a long time ago, we did, of course, things changed, but we did the revenue projections, and we rounded down. And then the administration and the budget committee did the expense projections and rounded up, and that's where you started from. And then there were, a lot of hard decisions that had to be made. But we have not done that for many years now.
That's interesting to me from an accounting perspective, that how you set a budget without knowing what your anticipated income is.
Well, and also, part of that process, I know in the past, if you the commissioner will have some idea of what to expect with the assessment in terms of the number of building permits, as well as if someone has added equipment, or if someone has, like this factory I was talking about, we sold the equipment. If some equipment has gone through, those fluctuations, they also would be, potentially a good source. Right. Which, don't get me wrong, we'll be happy.
Oh, no, this is just one board member. I'm new. Like I said, so I was just trying to get a feel for the whole process.
Yes, ma'am.
So, like I said, from an accounting perspective, I would think that we would have to know what revenue we project coming in before we set our budget.
Chairman, may I respond to that?
Yes, sir.
There hasn't been a tax rate change in the county now for several years. So historical numbers and collections of those historical numbers help in forecasting those amounts. The Commissioner's Office does provide us with information on some of those taxable items as well. And Tom can attest to that. It's not always necessarily direct communication with the Treasurer's Office, but there is communication with other offices that provide forecasting and historical knowledge, which is proven to be pretty efficient in the budgeting process.
And just like what Mike's saying, even today, we still have all kinds of mail from taxes, and we were trying to get you some numbers, and we were doing comparisons back, and they can attest to their finance meetings when we'll be ahead some one month, then it'll narrow, but just like Mike says, basically, it's pretty consistent.
Which is good. I know historically you can look at
Right.
but sometimes there can be something out of the ordinary, like businesses close, populations
Yes, ma'am.
change, and maybe and we have seen a decrease. So anyway, I was just curious to know what your part in it was, so it's been very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else?
I'd like to just make one observation, and Tom sort of alluded to it. Not all the courthouse sale on the steps or whatever, that's not always bad, because you made the reference where you had a good title. And I'd say a large percentage of what you have there is where you have an estate with umpteen errors that you can't find, and all of a sudden someone in the family can actually buy it and get a clean title.
That's correct.
I think that really helps us.
Yeah, what we do a query, and we alternate between years and the amount owed. Now, there are some exceptions that come up. When I say a query, a computer, we put parameters in. That computer generates the files, and we send them. But I had one last week, and I won't explain all the details, but it involved a child who, she's an adult, but she had inherited stuff after her father's passing, who he had inherited from his mother. Well, let me just say, the best thing that could happen for that particular lady was to have the tax sale so she could get the proceeds above and beyond the taxes from the sale of the property. And her attorney recommended that to her also. But yeah, what Mr. Atkins is alluding to, you'll have a family and there'll be 10 people. Maybe one of them is a grandson of a person who was a brother. I mean, you get into exponential lineage and people having a small interest in it. One person will want it. None of the others want it, but they don't want that person to have it. And so they refuse to sign over a deed or anything. And so ultimately, if you sell it, then the person that wants it can buy it. But, of course, it's an open bid. It's an auction. So you have to be prepared to buy it. That's the risk you take.
But you get a good title.
Oh, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you have several properties that are in all different stages of the collection process.
Right.
Is there one, if I wanted to get a list of 100 properties that were going up for sale in the next.
You can register with it's Taxing Authority Consulting Services, TACS. You can register with them, and they will include you in their email. And they will email you and tell you the next available sale date and a list of properties. And what we've been trying to do is, with the exception of the building in Saltville, that was a private sale, which the code allowed for because it was a factory. And anyway, but what we've been trying to do is some of the properties will go through title quick, and we could have a sale on those, probably 2 or 3 months after we turn them over. But we're trying to get 20 to 30 properties at a time. And so we have to wait a little longer, but it generates a lot of interest. I mean, we had, this past one, we met in the unfinished part beside our office in the courthouse. And the custodian and I had to keep moving stuff back because we had so many people to show up, for the sale. Years ago, we had tried doing tax sales with the county attorney, and that's very difficult to do because it takes so long to recover your money if you're a law firm. And so, most private attorneys have to meet payroll every month, whereas this is a firm with, I forget, like 70 employees and numerous lawyers. The lawyer that represents us, John Wright, used to practice here in Marion with Isaac Freeman when he was still in practice. He's from Grundy. Another one of the attorneys, curiously enough, some of you may remember Greg and Brian Haynes. Greg was a 1980 graduate of Patrick Henry. Brian was 2 years, I think, or 3 years ahead of me. They moved to Patrick Henry before we got out of high school. But Greg Haynes is now one of the attorneys. He went to school here. He was from Saltville. But just small world. That I mentioned. Do you know Greg?
Anybody else? Mr. Burkett, thank you very much.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you.
Same to you, buddy. Miss Emily Beers, Robinson Farmer Cox and Associates, audit presentation.
First, and then I'll give you all your handouts.
Hello and welcome.
Good morning, good evening.
You've had a day like me.
As I can. I'll go ahead and talk if you won't mind while I start handing these out. First of all, thank you for having me tonight. And I do want to apologize for you not having a copy of the audit financial statements in advance. This is just a small Cliff Notes version of your financial statements. Your actual statements are much larger. And ideally, we would like to have the statement out in advance, but unfortunately, the GASB standards seem to continue to get more and more complex each year, and your reporting deadline seems to get shorter and shorter, so they're kind of working at odds with each other. But, let me hand out your presentation files to you all. I haven't brought what I could carry. And you probably noticed as I hand them out that your reports have grown fairly significantly this year in comparison to last year. We did implement a new standard, Standard GASB 75, which recognized liabilities on your books for OPEB liabilities, for other post-employment benefits. Essentially, for you all, what that means is when you let your retirees stay on your health insurance plan. And you all have a few of those plans that you participate through. You have your own health insurance, and then you have plans through VRS where employees are allowed to stay on the insurance. So I'll talk about the OPEB in a little bit more detail later. But first, I thought we'd walk through your audit report. I know we've got a couple new board members, so I thought we'd walk through this first, and then we'll kind of get to the cliff notes. And then if you guys have any questions for me, we can do it at the end, or if you want to interrupt and ask questions as we go along, that's fine too. I'm here to serve at your all's pleasure, so however you'd like to do it's fine with me. So just to get started, I won't go through the entire audit report. We probably don't have time for that, and I might lose a few people along the way. So I just want to point out a couple of key things for your financial statements. On pages 2 to 4 of your financial report is your audit opinion. Basically, your audit opinion is where we opine on whether we think that the amounts that are shown in your financial statements are materially correct in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So you guys have a clean, unmodified opinion here, which is what you want. You can either have an unmodified or a modified opinion. So you all have an unmodified opinion. It looks essentially the same as last year. We did add a couple of paragraphs in relation to the new standard that was implemented, but otherwise, no real changes from last year. On pages 5 to 6 of your report are your entity-wide financial statements. And these are where your long-term assets and your long-term debt shows up for your governmental funds, your business-type activities, and then your component units. You might notice here on Exhibit 1 on page 5 that you've added a component unit this year. The library is now included. It used to be a regional library, and now that it's just the Smyth County Library, you guys provide a significant amount of the funding for the library, so they're included in your report as a component unit now. But Exhibits 1 and 2 are more like you would see financial statements of a for-profit company that show the long-term aspects and the long-term liabilities that are due. The next couple of exhibits are on a modified accrual basis, and these are a little bit closer to cash basis so that you see just near-term liabilities that will be due essentially in 60 days. That's not, a hard rule on 60 days, but it's pretty close. So we accrue back payables and liabilities for 60 days, and then we record receivables for the same time frame to match those up. So if you're looking for, how are you going to make your payments that are upcoming in the very near future, Exhibits 3 and 5 are kind of the place to look for that information. The next couple of statements are on your water and sewer fund, and those are more like the Exhibits 1 and 2, the entity-wide statements where the capital assets and long-term debt are recorded there. And then we're going to skip past the next few sections towards the end. The next section is really the notes to the financial statements. That'll go into more detail to explain a little bit more about the numbers that show up in the basic financial statements, to provide some more information, discloses the estimates that go into your financial statements and how those are derived. You've got some required supplementary information that has budgetary information and pension reporting. That's on pages. The notes all the way through the RSI are pages 15 through 137. And I'm going to jump all the way back to page 147 of your report. I will let you all read through the report and ask questions at a later date after you've had some time to review those numbers a little bit more closely. But on page 147 is what I call your yellow book opinion. It's your opinion in accordance with government auditing standards. And this is where we give an opinion on your internal control structure. As part of the audit, We review your internal controls, we make sure that you've got controls in place, that they're operating effectively, and if we find any deficiencies with your internal controls, those would be reported here. We also have to perform compliance procedures in accordance with the APA's audit specifications, and if we had any non-compliance, that would also be reported in this opinion. Again, with this opinion, you can have modified or unmodified, and you guys have a clean, unmodified opinion. So we didn't have any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that we felt needed to be reported in your Yellow Book opinion. The next opinion that shows up in the last opinion on page 149, this is the opinion in accordance with uniform guidance. Because you guys receive more than $750,000 in federal funds during the year, we perform single audits, we select major programs and test those programs to make sure that the manner in which those programs are operated, where the expenditures go, how that money is spent, and how everything is handled and documented. We make sure that everything that you're doing with those programs is in accordance with uniform guidance, but also in accordance with the specific grant, program, and award, and any restrictions that it might have. And again, you guys have a clean, unmodified opinion here for your uniform guidance. That's really the level of detail that I was going to go into in the audit report. Like I mentioned, I know that nobody's had a chance to review it because I just handed it to you. So after you've had some time to review it and look at it more closely, my contact and Corbin Stone, the partner in charge, our contact is both of our contact information is on the front of the presentation file. And as you review, if you come across questions, feel free to call or email us. I wanted to go over the presentation a little bit. So if we start on page 1 here, really I've just pulled out a few key pieces of information from your financial statements just so that you can see a comparison over the years. So this top part is looking at fund balance for the general fund, and you had about $10.5 million in fund balance. And then fund balance is broken down into the restricted and the unrestricted. Your restricted fund balance is really where you have multiple funds that are accounted for by the county on a day-to-day basis, but in accordance with accounting standards, we can only present specific major funds in your financial statements. So all those other funds get merged into the general fund. So the restricted balance that you see here is really a result of all of those merged funds. We want to make sure that those funds are still accounted for and tracked because they are for specific purposes. So those are not to be used at your discretion. So they're still shown as restricted, but that's where that number is coming from. And there's a note in your financial statement towards the back that details out what that $2.6 million is. Of your unrestricted funds, you guys have about $7.9 million in unrestricted. And one of the things that we like to do, you might remember from last year, is we like to look at that unrestricted fund balance as a percent of your expenditures. So we take the county expenditures, we add the school expenditures to it because you guys fund a large portion of the school's expenditures. We take out the contribution that you make to the school board so it's not being duplicated. And then we really compare your unrestricted funds to that total expense number. Your unrestricted funds were again $7.9 million, and your expense total is about $73.4 million for the year. So when we look at that as a percent basis, it comes out to about 10.8%. That's really right at about the minimum of where we would like to see it. We'd like to see it closer to 20-25%. That way you guys could operate for about a quarter of the year, for about 3 months. If your tax collections are down or you have an unusual expenditure pop up, you've got to replace a roof or something, like that happens, you've got the funds available and at your disposal for that. With that being said, when we looked at that number last year, it was at 8.4%. So you've grown fund balance as a percent of expenditures from 8.4% to 10.8%. So while it still isn't quite where we want it to be, that is a pretty good increase from one year to the next. So we would like to see, that trend continue and that fund balance continue to grow over the next few years. The highlighted green portion, the first highlighted green, is looking at your long-term debt for your governmental funds, and this is specifically debt issuances. This doesn't include pension liabilities, OPEB liabilities, and things like that are really estimates of what you might owe at a future date. These are true debt issuances that you will have to pay back at some point in time. So your debt issuances in your governmental funds went from $43.2 million to roughly 41.2 million. You guys didn't have any issuances this year for governmental funds. You really just paid off principal payments of about 2 million. You have essentially the same principal payments coming up next year. So hopefully, if there are no new issuances and those debt payments stay the same, and you can keep your other expenditures the same, we'll see fund balance grow again next year. No large debt payments due.
Emily, I noticed where you do the comparison from 2011 to 2018,
Mm-hmm.
and it's increased significantly, like from 13.5 million to 41. So is that because of major projects, or?
Courthouse and school.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, so that's just important, I think, to note.
Yeah, and I think for the last several years, I don't think that you had any new issuances aside from Adwolf Sewer last year. So for the last couple of years, you've just been paying off your debt, making your normal routine payments.
But nonetheless, there is debt.
Yes, there is. And then the next section down is on your enterprise funds, your water and sewer funds. And again, this is just looking at the green portion includes only true debt payments, and then the unhighlighted is the net position or equity for the water and sewer fund. You'll see that that did increase this year, and I think that predominantly relates to the Adwolf Sewer rural development funding that you guys received this year. Your other revenues and expenses seemed pretty consistent. That did increase the net position overall. Your total debt balance here did increase a little bit. That again relates to the Adwolf Sewer project. RD funding replaced the bridge loan that was in place. RD now requires the bridge loan that you guys had, and now they've funded their portion of that debt. So you had an issuance of about $800,000 this year to finish out the Adwolf Sewer, and then you paid off about $400,000 in debt, which results in a net increase of about $400,000. Again, for the water and sewer fund, your debt payments coming up for the next year are about $400,000. So hopefully, if all else stays fairly consistent, hopefully you can hold expenses where they are, and you can try to keep continuing to grow revenue so that we see fund balance and net position, grow over the years. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to have to be small steps every year to grow those balances. So I think last year was one step in the right direction, and we'd just like to see that continue over the next few years. I don't really go into debt per capita too much. I know that some people really like to see that, so I kind of include it. I think the comparison across localities is just not always consistent, because if people put in those OPEB liabilities and those pension liabilities, or they're putting in compensated absences, it can really skew those numbers. So I've included them in case anybody wanted to see them, but I wasn't going to go into too much detail on them. The next few pages really just kind of show a picture of your financials. So this chart, you can see the red line here is your long-term debt, and the blue is your unrestricted funds. So as we mentioned, your blue funds, your unrestricted funds are growing. They're trending up, which is what we'd like to see, and your debt is trending down. So we'd like to just see that continue over the next few years to help grow fund balance. The next chart just shows essentially the same thing, your water and sewer net position over the years. And as I mentioned, you see that jump in 2018, which predominantly relates to Adwolf Sewer. The next page goes over your general fund revenues by source. So most of your revenues, the ones towards the bottom here, your other local taxes, your charges for services, those stayed fairly consistent over the year. Your intergovernmental did spike a little bit this year. Part of that is actually not due to a new revenue. It's from your QSCAB interest subsidy. You've got loans where you pay interest and the federal government pays you back about 98 to 99% of the interest that you pay in. And we learned that we should be reporting that as a revenue instead of netting it against the expense, which in our opinion kind of grosses up your revenues and makes it look like you've brought in more money, but that's how the standards say we should report it. So really, if we were comparing apples to apples, we would either need to put that $400,000 in last year because you had the same subsidy last year, or take it out this year. I probably should have reflected that in the chart so that it didn't jump like that. So maybe next year I'll take that out. But the other increase that you see that makes up most of that overall increase of about probably 900,000 total is social services, public welfare funds. You guys got about $300,000 more in assistance for welfare funds this year. And then that top line there is your general property taxes, and I think if we look at the next chart, that'll actually better explain why that increased. So this chart is your assessments by tax year, and as you can see, real estate stayed fairly flat, which is what we're seeing for the most part. In some places, we're actually seeing that real estate assessed values are declining. So yours, I'm happy to say, at least stayed pretty consistent and didn't drop like we've seen in other localities. Your public service did go up slightly, and it's gone up the past couple of years. But really, it's your personal property that went up this year. Your assessed values for merchants, capital, and machinery and tools went up by about $7 million. Your airplane assessed values went up by about $2 million, and your interstate personal property went up by $1 million. So you saw quite a few increases in your assessed values. And if you flip back to the other page, you'll see that your tax revenue went up. And so I think those go hand in hand. Your assessed values went up. The collections on the same increased as well. This next page is kind of small and difficult to read. But really, it's just to show you a little bit about GASB 75. I won't go into a huge amount of detail. We just wanted to point out that we did record $2 million roughly in OPEB liabilities for the county and another $10.8 million on the school board side. And again, these are the health insurance plans where retirees are allowed to stay on the health insurance after they retire. In most cases, and I believe it's the case in yours, the retirees pay the full portion, but by allowing an older population to stay on the health insurance, you create a subsidy, and your premiums go up as an effect. And so these liabilities are essentially recording the present value of that increase. And what I wanted to point out, the chart in the middle, you don't really have to study it, but you can see that a lot of assumptions go into these numbers, and one of those is the discount rate that they use to bring those dollars back to present value. If that discount rate changes by 1% in either direction, it can really swing your liability. It's sort of like the pension. We had a very similar schedule insurance last year for pension. So just to point out that there are a lot of adjustments, and these are big numbers, and they can change pretty drastically depending on the assumptions that go into those. Now, those assumptions are put in by an actuary. It's outside of anybody's control. You all are paying what you should on your VRS, and you're paying on your premiums. So that's all determined by an actuarial study that's performed each year. The next thing that's in your handout are the audit recommendations that we had for this year. I don't typically go into too much detail. You guys haven't had a chance to read through them. So I'll let you guys read through those, and if you have any questions at a later date, feel free to email or call us. These are just areas where we thought we could provide some recommendations to help either make things more efficient or provide a little bit better of an audit trail for our purposes, none of which we thought were material in nature, or they would have been recorded as a yellow book finding. And then I'll skip to page 9. This is, it's called a required communication with governance, and you guys have a pretty boilerplate letter, which is what you want from your audit report. But this is just where we go over basically the results of the audit in a much more concise manner. We've disclosed to you guys that you have the new financial statement standard that was implemented 75, and along with that was 85, which was just a clarifying standard. It really didn't have a financial statement impact. The next section we tell you about your estimates that go into the financials, and we've already really discussed the most important one in my opinion, and that's the OPEB and the pension liabilities and all those estimates that go into that. The next page, we would tell you here if we had any problems dealing with management or the staff. I think that you guys have a great staff, and one thing that is really nice about working with the staff here is that people are willing to not only help us with the audit, but they also communicate with each other. It's not everywhere we go that we see that the county works with the school board, works with the treasurer, works with social services to help find solutions to problems, to help get audit documentation to us, to to help answer questions. So it is refreshing to see that, everybody's really just working for the common good of helping get the audit complete and work for the county. So I did just want to mention that. Otherwise, there's nothing really else to discuss in the letter. It's just standard template language that we're required to include. The other thing that you have sort of at the back of your handout is another stapled handout. And this just goes over, there are 6 new standards that come out that will go into effect for FY19 to 2021. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I just wanted to give this to you all. It kind of puts the standards into hopefully more generic terms that are easier to understand and gives you a little bit of a look out to the future and things that you might need to start compiling information on to get ready for the audit. And of course, we'll work in the spring to help make sure that you guys are aware of the new standards and can start working on getting that information together so that we can report appropriately for the upcoming years and get those standards implemented. That was all I had to go over. Again, I do want to apologize for you not having the report in advance, but we will be happy to answer any questions as you all do review the audit.
I think that is a lot of information to digest. I appreciate your professionalism and knowing your product. So I don't know where you drove from, but wish you a safe travel back.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming and sharing it with us. Does the board have any questions?
No, I think we'll have some time to review it, Emily, as you said.
Yeah.
I know the library is a part of that this year. And there were a couple of things I wanted to ask about some of those, but it was a pleasure working with you from the library side this year. So
Good.
working with you.
Good. You guys are always, I always like coming down here. I don't have clients that I don't like, but I have clients that I do like a little bit more than others. And you guys are definitely some of my favorite clients. So we really like working with you all and appreciate the opportunity. Well, if somebody else has anything for me, I'll hit the road.
Everybody good? Safe travels and
Thank you very much. Good to see you all.
Guys, we've kind of went through this thing without any kind of breaks whatsoever, and we're almost done, so we'll take a break when we get done. Is that okay? I don't think, yeah, we'll go one thing. Committee recommendation, Personnel Committee. And that's nothing to report. We just had some closed session discussion of some scenarios, and no kind of recommendations came from that. So with that being said, Supervisor comment. We're to the table sorted on that. So, does it matter? Ms. White?
Thank you all for coming. Glad to have you here. And everybody has a place to come.
Mr. Blevins?
Appreciate everything. Hope everyone has very nice holidays. Hopefully you get to visit with some family and eat a lot of good food. And be safe.
Mr. Atkins?
Nothing really, just everybody have a nice Christmas, and please remember the reason for Christmas.
Very good. Mr. Ray?
Just my apologies for being foolishly late. Apologize. And I caught the tail end of some stuff, and being part of the budget committee, I'd just like to say that when we see previous, current, we go several years back and we see current budget, and revenues projected usually aren't the miss. It's usually rising costs in certain departments and certain entities. So I just didn't want that to be a takeaway that projections are an issue, because from a budgeting committee perspective, and I'm the new guy, I've just been on it a year, but I don't see that we miss projections. We just, you can't,
It's hard to chase
it's
it.
hard to chase it when you don't know what the expenditure side is. That's it. Everybody have a safe trip home.
Can I add one thing? It was nice to see that the fund balance has grown a little. I would like to point out to everyone that they recommend 3 to 4 months worth of operating capital. It's kind of like a family. If you don't have enough to replace the flat tire, then you're putting yourself in a bind when you have a flat tire. So as we work to grow that, obviously a lot of tough decisions have to be made. And sometimes we have, if someone hears that we grew a little, then they want it immediately. And if you keep doing things like that, you never really can get to where you're operating responsibly with the finances of the county. So hopefully we can see that trend continue to build that.
Sorry I missed, but thank you guys for your addition here in the county. And it was good to hear the auditor speak. You know, we hear chatter of how things are, and that chatter's not always true. And it's good to hear from somebody that, you know, that says that things are working efficiently and in a positive manner. So, good to hear. Everybody have a safe trip home.
Mr. Call?
Everybody have a Merry Christmas, and if you're still unsure about presents for me, in the words of my grandkids, cash works.
Well, I'm going to be the bearer of bad news, I suppose. We have to continue this meeting till December the 27th. So,
Is that when you're passing out Christmas presents?
That's when we get a bonus.
where's the vice chairman? My California daughter will be home. So, I appreciate everybody being here that could, and the audience and participation. Very thankful for what you guys do in our county and community, and we try to be there for you as much as we can, because we like you being there for us. So, and with that said, I guess that's all till the 27th, and Merry Christmas to everyone. 7 o'clock.
27.